Hello, fellow homesteaders. I'm Tara, and today we're going to be talking about dwarfing vegetable plants. The first time I did this, I did it accidentally, and most of them worked out really well, so I decided I would try it on purpose. You can buy seeds or even plants that are already been conditioned to be dwarfed. They are determinate plants, meaning they have been grown and cultivated to grow to 12, maybe 14 inches tall, depending on variety. And once they hit that height, they fall over and it looks like they're dying. It looks like they need water. They get really brown, their leaves curl under, but the fruit on it looks nice and healthy. And that's just what they do. They're annuals, and like any other vegetable plant, but they are made to grow to a certain height, and then that's it. They fall over, everything's ready to harvest. Those types of plants and seeds, if you're a rural homesteader, you definitely are not going to find them in a nursery anywhere you live. And even if you're not, if you live in suburbia, you're homesteading in an urban area, you're still going to have to find more of a specialty garden center or look online, and you're not going to be paying an inexpensive price for most of these type of seeds or plants, and finding them organic, heirloom, non-GMO is almost an impossibility. If you can find plants that are non-GMO or heirloom that are already cultivated to be dwarfed by the manufacturer, please share it in our comments section with our readers. They may be interested in checking those out. These are a combination of different types of tomato plants. I have some Thomas Jeffersons here, some early girls, some mortgage lifters, and honestly I forget what the other one is. These are not the ones that are typically made by a manufacturer to be dwarfed because they are a tall, bushy plant. Tomato plants in general are made to be bushy. And even when you grow a dwarf variety, you're still going to need to have a pot that's going to have a good 10 inches of soil in it and allow about 2 feet of growing space. I'm growing indoors right now because it's winter. You can grow these indoors, you can grow them outdoors. You can grow them in the ground, but you have a lot more maintenance and pruning to them. If you take them outside of a pot, they're perfect for a patio. You really need to keep them in the pot to keep the work down and keep them small. Most people who grow a dwarf or miniature, whatever you want to call it, type of plant are doing so because they're conserving space. So it's not something you typically would put in a ground plot anyway, but you may have a raised bed you want to put them in, which is going to cut down a little bit on the work as a typical garden that you'd be, tilling up with a tractor. That makes them excellent for indoor growing, balcony growing. When you buy a variety from a commercial manufacturer, it's a Tom Thumb, a cherry tomato, grape tomato, that type of variety. And if you have a dwarf plant as a cherry tomato plant, you're going to see tomatoes come off of it. They're not going to look any different in size really than a regular cherry plant. They just get a little bit taller, a little bushier. But if you're growing a plant that is just a typical vegetable variety, you're going to dwarf on your own because it's fun and it's very cheap. You're going to have to understand that your fruit, your vegetable, is going to be a much smaller size than normal. They are little dwarf, cute little baby vegetables. I can show you here. I had some little tomatoes that were green and looking great on one of my plants last night on this one. And thanks to a toddler who was trying to help a little bit too much, that broke off and I could not melt it back together here enough to keep it. But there is a picture, thankfully. I did get a picture of my little tiny miniature tomatoes, and it is in the article. But I'll move this up a bit closer so you can see. This is a pepper plant that I dwarfed. You can see the little tiny pepper going on there. This will be a nice sweet green pepper when it grows, but these will not be a typical size. So when you're using them in a recipe, it'll be equally delicious as a full-size standard vegetable. But you're going to have to do a little bit of math to figure out how many of your miniature peas or cabbage heads or cauliflower or what have you, because just about any vegetable can be dwarfed if you're willing to put the work into it. You know how you need them for a recipe. If it calls for 2 large tomatoes, you're going to have a handful of your little miniature tomatoes and then probably another handful to make 2. So that's about what it usually evens out to. 1 handful of your miniatures will be equal to a fairly standard sized tomato. Now to dwarf these, I followed the route that I did accidentally the very first year, and I'm going to show you what happened this year and show you how I did accidentally. This is just a typical size flat, and you can see I have the leavings of dead tomato plants in here. Left them in here to keep this all honest. These are the ones who did not make it. So you need to expect to have some loss when you're trying to dwarf your own, no matter what you're doing. These were tomatoes, and I think I had a couple peppers in here. They all do not do well to dwarfing. The first time I did it, I had too many tomato plants. We had a horrible year that was extremely wet. Tractor went down, got in the garden late, and I had too many for our garden that was not our major ground plot. Everybody else had either given up on gardening that year or had what they could, already growing. Didn't want to start any for a fall garden. So I left them in their little containers like these, hoping somebody might want them, put on Facebook even, somebody here, they're free, come get them. And they just sat there, and some, like these, died, but the other ones grew. They just grew to a smaller stature before they started producing blossoms and tomatoes. I had peppers in it. I don't remember now the other vegetable that I had in there, but they all grew and started being miniature versions of themselves and growing miniature vegetables. That's what got me intrigued in dwarfing them on your own, to give them as some presents at Christmas time or any other time. The people who couldn't get out, some older folks in the family, or some of the kids who were in college or rental apartments, they could still have some fresh, natural food growing. And besides being a homesteader, we are survival homesteaders, so we like to gear on the prepping side of things and make sure there's always a steady food supply. These were great for our other prepper friends because they're portable. So that's the reason I went ahead and learned more about it. And what you need to do is you need to start your seeds or start your plants. You can grow them from seeds. I had just purchased plants. It'll work from seeds. It'll work with any seeds you have. Take you a little 4-pack or 6-pack like this, or these nice little reusable earth-friendly ones I got on clearance. The holes are about the same size. These are better because they're a little bit bigger, but this can work for most varieties. And you're just going to let them grow in their containers for a good month and a half, almost 2 months. And some will make it, some won't. And you make sure they get the sunlight they need, the water they need. If you're using organic fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, do whatever you do to your dwarfing plants that you're going to do to your regular full-size plants, or you would if you're also cultivating full-size plants. And at the end of that month and a half to 2 months, any ones that you have that are still living, and even if they're looking a little weak, that's okay because you're stunting their growth, so it does affect everything else about their health. But as long as these ones have, they have nice green leaves and nothing insurmountable that you can't deal with as you would a full-size plant, you're going to go ahead and transplant them. And you want to make sure some things, depends on what you're growing, might only need 8 inches of soil. So a smaller container, like the one these peppers are in, would work. Actually, I'm getting ready to transplant that pepper plant. But as a rule of thumb, put it in a pot where they can get about 10 inches of soil. And believe it or not, you can even do melons, summer squash, anything like this. But what you do have to remember with viney plants, or ones that get tall like tomatoes, is even though you're going to dwarf them from their growing pattern, and then you're going to grab out my little clippers here. And as they grow, because you're not dealing with some commercially manufactured seeds or plants that were bred to stay small that are determinate. These are indeterminate or semi-determinate plants that are going to grow to the height they want to grow to unless there's human intervention. These nice little clippers here, and as they start to get a little too tall, you're going to go ahead, clip off the tops, and you're going to keep them from growing any taller. Just keep doing that consistently, and they're going to start getting bushier instead of taller. You get some really long ones going out like this. If they're exceeding your space, you can go ahead and snip off some of the outside, but you want to be careful and keep the snipping to a minimum because you are essentially giving the plant a wound that can cause growth, spread, get any kind of plant disease in it. So you only want to prune when it's essential to keep them cut back. If you keep them, they're little containers for that full month and a half to 2 months, then their size should already be not a determinate size, but a size that's going to be more compact and it's not going to try to grow to its full height. But when you bring it indoors or you have a nice sunny spot outside, it's getting optimal everything. The soil you're supposed to have, any fertilizers you want to use, and optimal light. It's going to take away a little bit of the dwarfing. It's going to try to go ahead and grow and thrive as it normally would. Since its growth is stunted, it would never get to a full-size producing plant at this point. But it's still going to want to grow and grow and grow because you've given it a healthy environment. So expect to do trimming probably about once a week depending on the type of plant. If you're dealing with tomatoes, you're going to need to stake them. Just have some little bits of wood like this, some dowel rods, anything like that, and some yarn or string, and stake them up as you would, a typical full-size plant. Green beans, you can do green beans, you can do peas, you can do kale. You want to stay away from anything that's going to be a trellis unless you have a lot of size. If you're more space than just a table, if you're growing outdoors on the patio, or you don't want the mess of dealing with a regular garden with a bent over, weeding and all that. You're going to put your containers up on a table or a ledge, even outside where you have ample space, or you're going to transplant them into a raised bed. The more space they have, the more they're going to want to fill it. So you're going to need more trimming when you do that. But if you want to do something that needs a trellis or spreads out more, but still keep it compact, that might be more ideal in a raised bed for something from the melon or pumpkin family. You can keep them a lot smaller and still get the production of the fruits or vegetables you want, but not taking up the massive amount of space. So the more you grow, the more you're going to have to prune. So you're going to need to keep that in mind when you're deciding how many dwarfs that you want to grow. If you put them the larger space that they're in, the more they're going to want to fill it. And every one of them may need prune. So you don't want to get them grown to this stage and then lose them because you just can't keep up with the pruning. And sometimes, like this one here, they can get spindly. I'm not having great hopes for this tomato plant here. As you can see, it's gotten very tall, but its lower leaves have just died off. It has not filled out nicely like the rest of my dwarfs. So this one is loving its move indoors that it recently made, and it's wanting to grow and grow and grow. They get spindly like that with their standard size plant or dwarf. It's not likely going to be a producer. Your ones that are filling out and vining more like this, and these ones over here, we should get some really nice miniature tomatoes from them. This is filling out nice and full. It's move indoors, cause some of the leaves to turn a bit brown. The change in environment, same as happening when you're wanting to harden off or dampen off to move inside or out with your plants. The change in circumstances caused some problems with this pepper plant, not its dwarfing. So that's something to think about also. If you're going to start these inside, maybe move them outside, you have to follow the typical protocols for relocating your plants, but it's quite that simple. That's all there is to it. You do not need to buy a special seed. I would stay away when you're doing tomatoes of some really large ones. If this is your first time out, stick to something like a cherry or a grape tomato, something that's going to be smaller and require less pruning and be more adaptable to a smaller environment. And as you get some experience at it, you can go ahead and play around like I did. These are on sale. These are varieties of plants we were buying for our outside garden anyway. So I went ahead and dwarfed these. And I had, look at the ones I have here, and I have some elsewhere also, and the ones that I have that are dead. I probably had a 65% success rate, and not counting that little one over there that's probably not going to make it. So 65% of the plants I tried to dwarf worked, and if you're gardening outside, you lose plants anyway. So give it a try. Don't invest a ton of money in expensive plants or seeds. Buy what you normally would if you're doing cherries or grapes, or if you're doing kale. You can buy some of the same variety. Just try to stay away from anything that's going to give you a very large fruit or vegetables your first go around. It's going to need immense trimming to deal with. Make it as simple on yourself as possible, and hopefully you'll have a successful harvest. And when you do, please come back to our comment section here or on our social media and share some photos. We'd love to see what you grew, and share some tips for other folks. And if it was an epic failure, that's fine. We all have those. Let us know what pitfalls we can avoid. And if you've done this before and have better tips than I do, by all means, please feel free to share them.